the time somebody posed a question to me that I never thought about. Somebody said, would you die for your kids? I'm like, oh, in a heartbeat, of course. Everybody says yes. I'm
Yeah.
not a monster. And they say, okay, uh, would you live for them? I was like, oh, that's a different take.
Welcome to Frontline Women, a show dedicated to women on the leading edge of change and culture renewal in America. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, and I'll be your host and guide as we explore emerging issues and opportunities for women to lead side by side with men every day. So let's get off the sideline and onto the front line right now. You are going to love our first guest on the Frontline Women podcast, Dr. Sariya Saabye. She's a physical therapist, a wife, a mom of 2 daughters. As if that's not enough, hold on. She's also an expert in biomechanics, a former world team power tumbler, barefoot ultramarathon runner, a TedX speaker, and author of Will It Help You Beat the Reaper? The High Achiever's Guide to Focus, Speed, and Top 1% Results. And I have devoured that book. So I'm going to make sure you have a link in the show notes, because after you watch this episode, I know you're going to want to read her book. So through some powerful experiences that Sariya has had, she discovered the 3-step race framework used by elite performers to rise above the chaos and unlock those top 1% results. So hint, it is not about doing more. What Sariya talks about is editing your life with ruthless clarity. I love that. So that every ounce of effort drives results. And if you think about spring cleaning that we're supposed to be doing in our houses every year, well, in our lives and in our careers, we have to do spring cleaning every quarter. I would say that's what Sariya and I were just talking about. I don't care how successful you are or how together you think you are. There are moments. It's almost like our biorhythms, there are moments where we realize we have to cut the chaos out. And Sariya is an absolute expert in this. She's also one of the loveliest people I've had the pleasure of attending conferences with and being in a mastermind with. And so I know you're going to love her as much as I do. Sariya, thank you for taking the time to be with the Frontline Women community today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
All right, well, we're going to dig right in because I want them to hear all about the one big, huge experience in your life that really got you on this path of focusing less on the physical therapy profession and more on expanding your work to speaking, writing, and coaching. And you can tell them about that too. But what was that big life experience that caused this shift where you realized physical therapy is great, but there's more?
Yeah, absolutely. And leading up to this kind of big experience, there were a lot of small things. But the thing that kind of really changed everything, the interesting thing was it was a very, very quiet experience, but very intense, which I know you know a lot about with your background in ultra running, and you just finished Badwater 135, which is insane. So my experience was an ultra marathon that kind of changed everything. So it's called the MR 340, and it's a 340-mile boat race on the Missouri River. So they give you 85 hours to do it. And I did it as a women's solo. And that year, there were only 35 women's solos that finished. And
So pause for a second, Sari, because I know that there are some women out there and men, maybe we've got some men listening, who are thinking a 340-mile boat race, no problem, with a motor.
yeah.
What kind of boat was it, Sariya?
Yeah, you're not allowed. Okay, that's a good distinction. So you're not allowed to use any kind of motorized boat. You will see every other configuration of boat, and they have different categories for different boats. You can use a rowboat, you can use a kayak, a canoe. There's even something they call it the spider or something, and it's pedaled, and it looks, it has these big arms. It's crazy. So it's a really interesting community. But I was in a kayak. It was 17 and a half feet, huge kayak, and it was the philosophy that I devised to do this race. Otherwise I would have never done it. I actually stopped this race for years leading up to it. I saw a picture of it in a magazine, and it just was so intriguing to me. It was beautiful picture of a river and these boats. And I was like, I can't ever do that. I'm busy. I'm not an endurance athlete. I just can't ever do that. And I held on to it, and I'm not one to hold on to things. I held on to
do
that.
know, because you can watch a race for years. But with Badwater, 15 years, I watched that race, and so I understand being intrigued and drawn towards some, huge challenge like that. Absolutely. And I would love for you to, if you will, give me a link for the show notes about that race.
Yeah, definitely happy to share. I will promote the heck out of that race till the day I die. I think doing something like that, it takes you to a place that you didn't know you had, and it provides a clarity because again, it's quiet. So I had 4 hours of kayak experience going into this, and the philosophy that I devised
Four
for the
4 hours. This is another moment where I'm like, hold on, folks. Hear that? 4 hours of kayaking experience. That's it. 4 hours before she did a 340-mile kayaking race. Crazy.
Well, I'll explain why and what I devised my race framework that I go into a lot of depth with people now. I devised it for this race because I'd stalked it for so long, and I knew I really, really, really wanted to do it. And I thought, well, I'm not qualified. And so I finally thought, okay, I'm going to do one thing that I am qualified to do, and that's sign up. I can hit enter on that sign up page and I can do that. And then came the oh shoot, when learning everything that went into this race. And I thought, this is going to take over my entire life, because most people that do this, they train. It's a very involved process. You have to, get this massive boat onto a car and drive it somewhere. Have to have somebody help you get it into the river. You paddle wherever you're going, and then somebody has to pick you up, drive you back to where you started. And usually it's progressing up to the race. There's a whole race series that people do that get longer and longer and longer. And I'm like, this is going to be my whole life. And I couldn't do that. So I had to, before I just, crashed and burned on this whole thing or let it take over my whole life, I had to come up with a strategy that was going to allow me to do this and keep my peace at the same time. I boiled everything down to one question. And that's the question that is the foundation of my whole framework. So there's a pacer boat in the race, and its job is to move through the race at the minimum pace. And it's a simple premise. If it beats you to any time point, you're out. And that boat is called the Reaper. So for me, I didn't have to do everything. I had to do one thing, and that was beat the Reaper. I wasn't trying to win the race. That would have been a whole different set of criteria. I just needed to beat the Reaper. So I used that as a critical question leading up to the race for everything that I did, because from ultra running, and really this is true for everything, but especially in ultra racing, the mind is a bigger issue than the body. It really is.
Absolutely.
The body will quit long before the mind will. So if I've got my mind trained correctly, that's going to put me way ahead of so many. And again, 35 women finished the race, 65 signed up. So everything I did leading up to the race had to fit that filter. So if I have this pizza, is it going to help me beat the Reaper? If I have this conversation with this negative person or this positive person, is it going to help me beat the Reaper? If I stay up an extra hour or listen to this podcast, skip a workout, is it going to help me beat the Reaper? Because it's not just the time I spent on the water. That honestly was the least of it. It was all the other things. Everything in my life drove to that goal. So yeah, in the race itself, it was so incredibly quiet. And as I'm doing the race, you're alone for a lot of it. And you start seeing these analogies everywhere to life and how it fits into different things that we're doing. So I developed this whole, over the 85 hours of the race, it took me 81.
Hey, you beat the Reaper. So
I beat the Reaper. I developed this framework, and I came away with a completely different perspective on everything. That was probably more than you were looking for.
No, I guarantee you, I'm not the only one listening to you right now who thinks, I want to know so much more about this experience. And I thought about, of course, in corporations or government organizations, as I've done strategic planning with different leadership teams, I try my best to get them to be very specific and only do like 2 to 3 strategic goals and keep those at the forefront in almost every decision that they make throughout the year. And most leadership teams want to get lost in the chaos. Okay, so now I'm expanding this beyond the individuals, but just with organizations. They're so addicted to the chaos because there's a different kind of certainty in that chaos. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of, I'm at the mercy of, so I always have an out for not achieving
100%.
a goal. You know what I mean? And this, what you did and what you help other people to do now, and your book certainly will help people to do that, is to stop allowing yourself to use that excuse of chaos. Because like you said, whether it's, am I going to eat this piece of pizza? I feel like skipping the workout today, but is that going to help me beat the reaper? When you're so clear on a goal and you hold yourself to it, you hold yourself accountable to it. I think this whole concept of beating the reaper makes that discipline actually more fun. So
Yeah.
the image that I have, and I've never done a 340-mile kayak. I've probably kayaked for an hour, at the most in my life in one shot. So I can't imagine having 4 hours of actual kayaking experience. Now, a lifetime of tumbling experience and fitness experience, of course. So no doubt you had crazy core and upper body strength and everything, and leg strength. But still, that is a repetitive motion for 81 hours. And I'm sure you had challenges along the way. What were some of those things that went through your mind as you thought, well, I'm as ready as I'm going to be? Okay, now you're on hour 40. Now you're on hour 50. What was going through your mind?
100%. So the first thing, and I talk about this in the book right off the bat, and it's something that I've never met anyone who does not suffer from this. I don't think there are people that don't suffer from this that aren't sane, is imposter syndrome. That was literally when I first pulled up to the starting point and I looked around and everyone that I saw looked like veterans. They're just their equipment is worn. They know what they're doing. They're super relaxed. And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know anything. They're gonna laugh at me. And then I was 40 miles in maybe, and this guy paddles up next to me, a tandem kayak paddles up next to me, and they're like, hey, is your paddle upside down? And I'm like, what are you talking? I'm looking at him like, no, it's not upside down. It's, and he just keeps looking at me. And the guy was like, just go on. I'm like, okay, that was weird. Another guy paddles up to me. He smiles at me and he says, hey, do this. And he makes like a baton motion, like to turn my paddle over. And I'm like, okay, I do that. And he goes, okay, now you're good. And I'm like, yeah, okay. That's what the other guy meant. So 4 miles in with my paddle upside down. And just, so I made games out of it as I went. I would try to catch people, different paddlers. So the first push was really where it was the easiest, I would say, the hardest physically, but the easiest mentally because so many people were together. The hype was there. I was singing and, everything was good. Then after that, I got maybe 2 or 3 hours sleep the night before. And then the next morning I get up and I was alone for hours, like to the point where I thought,
Imagine.
maybe I was going the wrong way on the river. I'm like,
these races spread out like
yeah,
very quickly. After a few hours, it's so spread out, you may not see anybody. And that's only, for me, 135 miles running. Your 340-mile race in the water, with a river that bends, and I can't even imagine like how many hours you spent by yourself. Well, you said it was quiet. Yeah.
yeah. And there's a quiet that happens on the river that doesn't happen anywhere else because it's water. And this is not a technical river. It's none of it is technical water. The hard part is the length.
Mhm.
Right. And so the trees there, it's not like rivers where I would go and, you have a float trip and you get off on the rocky bank and you swim. There are no banks like that. It's all trees that come straight down to the water. So it is the quietest of the quiet you ever heard in your whole life. And it all looks the same. So after hours of doing this and all you hear is the swish of your paddle in the water, you start to feel a little delusional. Things are what you start to question your sanity. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Hallucinations for sure.
100%. So the sleep deprivation was a huge deal. I talk about in the book peak buoys. They're these buoys that say submerged and they will just rise out of the water and hiss at you and just they come for your boat. There's video of it. It's insane. And they will destroy your boat. And that happened to me on the second day. And I was alone and it just hissed up out of the water and came at my boat. And I am just squirreling in the middle of the road trying to get around the thing. I don't know what's happening. And then I careen off to the side of this thing. I look back and it's gone. And the water is just still. And you're like, did that really just happen? Like, is it the mental game and everything in you says that it said you should stop.
Yeah.
Take the easy way out. But that was one of the things I had done before I went out there. No matter what, I was determined that I was going to smile and I was going to say I felt good. Every time you say it, it actually, you believe it more and you feel it more. But I had my crew out there too. And you know how this is. This wasn't just me. My husband had taken a week off of work. He's out there being eaten by mosquitoes and he's sleep deprived and trying to keep track of me and what I need and everything. And there was no way I was going to have that man pull me out of the water and then complain to him about this adventure I had
I
dragged
do.
him on.
My
It
husband
wasn't going
cleared
to
me for
happen.
Badwater and Salton Sea and Cape Fear, and Daytona and Kodiak. So like he's crewed me, and there is something about that that is very helpful, which is you don't want to have asked other people to interrupt their life and not finish what you started. So sometimes that's a really healthy pressure.
It is. And I think just in life, when you look around at things like that, what are the choices that you've made? And I've definitely been guilty of this many times in my life, and I try to be careful about it. Choices that we've made that we've pulled other people into, and now we're sitting there complaining about it. And, oh, this is so hard and I don't want to do it. And you've hyped these other people and now they're in there with you, but you're just being a big wet blanket and dragging them down. And especially as a leader, you can't do that.
Oh,
And
thank
there's
you for
research
saying that. Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Yes.
And there's research on, even if you have one person on your team that complains, your productivity goes down by like 80%. It's ridiculous from one person. And you cannot be that one person. You can't
Yeah.
be, especially as a leader.
And I think it's not so much about when you're miserable, fake it. You do that at first, but there is something when you start to approach your life and your work this way that you stop seeing challenges, especially ones that you've signed up for. You stop seeing them as the hard times, as bad, like it shouldn't be this way, it should be easy. And you start accepting the fact that this is what you signed up for. When I coach people that are having trouble with their teams or there's a conflict or something that they are really struggling with, I try to remind them this is the work. It's not like this shouldn't be happening. This is the natural course of things when you step into leadership, and you get to figure yourself out, figure other people out, and there's a different kind of courage and competence that is built when you accept that this is a challenge that I have asked for. And it's a puzzle. It's fun. It really can be fun. And for me with running, whether it's, okay, I got a blister forming, I'm getting cramped, maybe I got to double my salt or something like that. For you, anything out on the water that you've experienced in 81 hours, it's just crazy. You stop thinking this shouldn't be happening and you accept that, yes, it should be happening. This is exactly what the work is right here. And this is the thrill and, of the whole thing is facing yourself, in different ways. I wanted to ask you too, you were on the world team power tumbling. So you had this extreme team experience, where everybody's pulling together. Your scores matter for yourself and other people. And then going to this race where it gets very quiet on the water. And for long, long stretches, hours and hours, you don't see anybody. You may not see your crew for hours and hours. So, what was that difference for you being so tight with a team, even though it's high competition, high performers, and all of that, to now it's just you for hours and hours at a time in some of the worst moments of your life, probably?
Yes. I think, and that's a fantastic question. They're completely night and day experiences. I absolutely love teams. I love them. It makes me better because I always want to do, this sounds funny. I don't have a low self-worth, but I always want to do more for my team than I do for me. I'm always going to step up more in a team environment than I am just for me. And I felt like that out there. It was about me. Yes, I had my crew, but this was something I really wanted to challenge myself to grow, because in this life, my life could be as easy as I want it to be. In this culture, in this day, I could never leave my living room if I felt like it. I could work from home. I could sit on my couch. I could have food delivered to my door. I never have to be uncomfortable ever if I don't want to be. But that's not how we grow. And I knew I needed a challenge. I needed an experience to take myself to the next level. I never want to stop growing. I never want to be that person who gets complacent. And so that experience, yeah, you you see the deepest, darkest parts of yourself because you think all the thoughts that you don't have time for. Like when you're in a team experience, competition, everything's boom, boom, boom. And in tumbling, it's all very fast and we're loud and obnoxious and it's,
And
it's,
encouraging, and
yes.
encouraging, right? And then
Yeah.
you don't have that. You only have
Have
yourself.
that.
And that
So that,
kind of growth experience, whether it is an endurance sport or it's finishing a book, people say they want to write a book. You've written one, I've written one. There are the lonely hours as a writer as well, where nobody's going to tell you what to write. Nobody's going to create, some framework for your chapters and the right research to include. There is nobody. I mean, you may have your spouse and friends going, "Hey, that's great. How's the book going?" But you're on the water alone there, in the same way. So let me just ask you this. You had a shift in your life and your work as you started to strip everything down. So your 3-step race framework, I don't know how much you want to say about this. I would love for everybody to read about it in the book, but you discovered this, you chiseled away your own life and discovered what causes people to, cut through the chaos and get to that top 1% success. But you also were shifting your work from physical therapy to speaking and writing and creating this framework for other people to learn how to do the same thing in their own lives. What do you think inspired you to do that? And how's it going? How are you enjoying this shift from physical therapy to expanding to what is probably your real purpose in life?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It's been really cool. So prior to this, I had really specialized down. I'm 20 years of PT at this point. I had really niched down to running and lower quarter. That's my specialty. So my running business is Follow the White Rabbit, and I had worked with Harvard, and I was very much specialized. But no matter what, be it runners and I'm still working with acrobats and that kind of thing, or any patient that I saw as a PT coming in for a headache to a knee replacement or whatever, the physical piece was always just one part, and everything else was more overwhelming, honestly, if you don't clean up all the other stuff, right down to what you're talking about, the spring cleaning, literally the clutter in your house, all of it impacts all the other pieces. So to stay that niched, and I still am niche, but without the other components, the bigger mindset piece, you're really just limping along. You're never going to get to where you want to go. And that's what I was saying with the race. I needed that challenge. I need to keep upping my mental game. It's been fantastic. It's moving into the writing and speaking and everything. I'm always overwhelmed by the response that I get to the message. People, they say, "I've not been sure about what to do. I'm at this crossroads. And I heard what you said, and now I know exactly what to do." And we learned this in PT school, 90% of the diagnosis is subjective. So basically, you interview, and you as a coach know this. You interview someone, they have all the answers. They don't know they have all the
Absolutely.
answers, and they don't know how to put them together. But you as a coach are pulling that out of them, and you're saying, "You said this, and you said this, and you said this. You already had the answer. You just didn't see it."
Mhm.
And that's the thing. When you can trigger somebody, then you watch them put all their own pieces in, and it's not your solution, it's their solution.
It has
It
to be.
is it is life changing. It's completely fulfilling. It's incredible.
Yeah, and because there's so much noise outside, for all of us, that's what we're tuning into. That's what we're reacting to. We're making decisions based on that. We're, distracted by other people's needs and all of that. So learning how to cut all of that out and listen deeply, to yourself. I think in any profession, or even for some women in our community that are stay-at-home moms, and of course, they want to be the best they can be at that. They want to contribute in their community, but they also know that there's something else brewing. There's something that they have to say, or something that they want to do, and they feel like they have to wait until the kids are grown, before they start to live their purpose. And I know you're living your purpose right now. I mean, you were already providing amazing clinical care for people, and then you had these experiences, I'll say, in the endurance sport field, um, and that helped you see a purpose that you have, which is helping people to minimize, the distractions and all of that. and cut to the things that will help them beat the reaper. I'm going to go back to the title of your book because I love it. If we think about it that way, what is your goal, and what is the thing that is sort of chasing you that you want to stay ahead of? Learning how to do that, it requires that deep listening, and it requires those moments on the river by yourself so that you learn how to do that. So the people that you have coached or trained or spoken to, because I've heard you speak, and one thing that I love about you, and for anybody who is looking for a speaker for their organizations that can help people cut the chaos and cut the noise and all that and really focus, Sariya is a fantastic speaker. But it comes across that you are still serving. You're still very team oriented, even though you're the one on stage. You're not hiding behind anybody else. You're right there on stage being 100% you, and you affect people. You really do. Your story affects people. You're living your purpose right now. So for those in the audience who are looking for like their next step in their career, or even if they stay in the current role that they're in, because I always remind women, you don't need to change jobs. You don't need to give up your job, your good reputation, all the work that you've done to shift what's going on in your career. Or for a professional mom who is raising kids and all the busyness of that, you don't have to wait until the kids are gone to start living your purpose. And so how do you recommend that people handle that when they want to do more but life is already full? Do they need to wait till the kids are grown, or do they need to change jobs? I mean, what do you recommend for people to do to cut to what is my life purpose and how can I start living it now?
Yeah, and I think you hit on it before when you were talking about kind of tuning out everybody else to get very intentional within yourself. And you're right. When I'm on stage, I am so excited to be in a room full of people. I love feeding off their energy and understanding what they're going through and trying to work with them. I love that so much. One of the things I recommend in the book, and this really is critical, and you understand you're a mom, I'm a mom, a lot of your listeners are moms. You have to cut everybody else out to get clear on your vision. And I'm not saying forever, but to get clear. And this is, I think, especially hard for women. I find that guys have an easier time with it. It's just the way they're wired. But to sit down in a quiet place and just get completely clear and burn it all down, burn everything down. If you had nothing, if you had no husband, if you had no job, if you had no kids, if you didn't have the house that you're in, if you didn't have anything, just you alone, where anything was possible, what would you build? And it's really tough, I think, for women to cut that. My children, yes, they're important. We're going to do that later. Right now it's you, just you. What would you build? And the answers tend to really surprise people. Mm-hmm. And then after you've built that vision, you know what it is, then you can build back in your business partner, your boss, your kids, your spouse, whoever. How do they fit into that? How do we make this work together? But you have to know what you want first. And you bring up the really good point of kids. And I actually homeschool my kids while I have my
That's what
career.
Amazes me.
But one of the things that I've worked really hard on is they need to understand that I'm important too. And it helps them because they're my team as well. And that's what we talk about it all the time. We want to be really good teammates for each other. We talk about crewing. I say, okay, this one's got a soccer game tonight. We're crewing for her. We got to get her out the door on time. What does she need? This one's got theater, she's in this, we're crewing for her. And mommy's got a podcast today. Okay. What does mommy need? So we crew for each other and we use that terminology like we're a team. And, yes, I'm the boss.
This is even being passed to the next generation right now. So it's not just for, coaching clients or readers of your book or podcast guests. Like your kids are benefiting from this right now because you stepped into this, because you stepped into that race, or I should say those races, and allowed yourself to have different experiences and grow and become more clear on, it's laser focus on what you have to offer the world, and it's beautiful. So I'm really glad that you did that.
Yeah, no. And I think, and especially you think about how you're showing up for your kids, for your work, for your spouse, for your friends. how are you showing up? Because I guarantee you, if you have that pull, and that's my running coaching business is Follow the White Rabbit. It's white with a Y. And that's why, because I talk about it again in the book. We all have these white rabbits. So, like you got Alice in Wonderland and she sees the white rabbit and she's so intrigued, right? She sees him going by and she's so interested, but she's in her pretty little outfit and she doesn't want to get musty. She's not supposed to go chasing rabbits anywhere, but she's so interested. She has to go follow him down the rabbit hole. So that's the thing. Everybody has a white rabbit. That MR340 was a big white rabbit for me. And it just would not let me go until I finally followed down the darn rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And if you don't follow that thing, now it has to be good why. That's why I call it the white rabbit. Why are you following it? Because if it's just like, it'll make me feel good for 5 minutes, it's not good enough. But if it's a true calling, a true pull, you owe it to yourself to go down the rabbit hole and follow it. Otherwise, it's going to come across in the way that you're a parent, in the way that you're an employee, in the way that you're a leader. It's going to come across. You're going to feel, it's very off-putting energy. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I used to, so now I'm a minimalist. And I call the other version that I used to be an overwhelmed maximalist, which is everything, everywhere, all at once. And when you're like that, I used to see contentment as complacency. And I've learned that's not the case. So I used to push out of fear that I would just be complacent and I'd never go anywhere. Well, now I'm pulled because I have a purpose. And my energy, how I show up for other people in life is completely different. I'm present. I'm good where I am. Yes, I'm moving forward, but I'm good here. I'm grateful here. I'm not complacent. I'm not stuck, but I'm good. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I think when we have something that calls to, I'm going to go back to what you said about when you have something that calls to you. For you, it was the big 340, on the river. For me, it was Badwater 135 that got me into the whole ultra running thing. There's probably for everybody, there's some challenge, and it does not need to be a physical challenge. It could be you've always been fascinated by the violin or the piano. You've always been fascinated by this idea of making pottery or writing a book or whatever it is. It doesn't let you go. It chases you down. And we end up applying our logic and reasoning and saying, okay, that's selfish. I shouldn't do that. I should be focused on my kids or my spouse or my partner. So our logic ends up preventing us from taking action on something. It's going to keep calling to you. So whatever it is, folks listening right now, there's something that calls to you. It's not going to stop. And there's no need to wait until some point in time when you think it will be the sensible thing to do. For some of these things, it'll never be sensible to other people. And you don't know what you're going to learn from it. Just like Sariya, you're saying that, you couldn't have imagined what you were going to learn from that race. You just knew you wanted to do it. Right. And now you're, not only did you learn a lot, you're sharing that with other people, and your kids are benefiting from it because you had courage and determination to make the decision, prepare the best you could, and just put yourself out there and just do it. And I hope that everybody listening is really imagining themselves doing that thing that nags at them, may have been for years. Imagine yourself actually doing it sooner rather than later, because it's calling to you for a reason. It has something for you. A lot of times it does have to do with our purpose for our work or our purpose for the impact we want to have on our family. And so we don't have to know the answer to that, do we, Sariya?
No, and I actually going to circle back to something that you said about feeling selfish for doing it. I actually have a complete 180 take on that. I feel like it's very selfish to not do it because I owe it to everybody around me to show up as the best version of myself. I'm selfish. Women say, I don't want to go to the gym. It's selfish to take that time. If you're not healthy, because people tell me this all the time. Somebody posed a question to me that I never thought about. Somebody said, would you die for your kids? I'm like, oh, in a heartbeat, of course. Everybody says yes. Yeah. I'm not a monster. And they say, okay, would you live for them? I was like, oh, that's a different take.
It sure is.
Would you go to the gym every day? Would you watch your diet? Would you step into your purpose and serve people in a way that only you can? Because every one of us has unique gifting. Every one of us has something that only we can do the way we can do. I am a terrible Dalisia Coppersmith, but I am the best Sariya Saabye you're ever going to meet.
You sure are.
And if I'm not that, then I'm selfish, to be honest. I believe that. So I would flip that perception 110%, especially for women.
I love that. I mean, that's like, it just stopped me, mentally and emotionally when you said, well, would you live for them? Do you love them enough to live for them? And society, okay, we'll just go back to society, tells women that pouring yourself out and serving endlessly, and we actually say this to men too, just in different ways, right? That they have to be successful and work and provide and all of all this pressure that's on men too. And so that question is great for any gender. It's like, do you love your kids or your family, your friends, whatever, enough to die for them? We would quickly say yes. And then when you pause and go, all right, well, do you love them enough to live for them? Wow. Wow. And what does that mean? We have to be able to answer that, at some point. We have to know what that means, what that looks like to live for those that you love, and for yourself, of course, but everything that your kids are benefiting from, that you've done. If you were still rowing your kayak in circles and only doing PT, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's having a career as a physical therapist, like, it's huge. Like, you're changing people's lives, and that's wonderful. But there's a Sariya Saabye for a reason, and it was more than that. So that was a part of your life, huge part of your life. It definitely still matters because of your running business. But this other piece where it's outside of physical therapy, it's outside of endurance sports, it's the contribution that you have to all of us, no matter what our field is or our hobbies or our interests or our purpose. This idea of this race framework, which is in the book, it applies to our lives, and whether it's quarterly or monthly or weekly cleaning that we need to do to simplify. So let me ask you this now. A lot of the women that are listening, what advice do you have for simplifying, calming the chaos? And maybe they're thinking that they can't do that. It's just, hey, maybe someday I'll be able to do that. I just can't do that. How do you get people to see that they can? What advice do you have for them?
So clarity is the first thing. And if people aren't giving themselves permission, it's because they don't have clarity. So if someone's saying I can't do it, it's because they don't understand what it is they're called to do first. So the first thing they need to do is get really clear on what they need to do. And again, I do it through the race framework. So really briefly, 3 steps. 1 is the race, figure out which races you're in. 2 is the reapers, figure out what the reapers are that are standing between you and dominating the race. And 3 is the rise. And that's about doing it sustainably throughout time. But that first thing, figuring out where you're actually at. And one of the tools I give people, because they think they're in one place and they're not, if you want to understand where your priorities are, look at your calendar and your bank account, because they will tell you an honest picture of where you spend your time and your money. That's what's important to you right now, or that's what you're prioritizing to you.
Absolutely.
And if you're not happy, you may want to look at those things and figure out what's going on there.
Yeah. That concept of, know what your races are, because it could be a professional one, it could be one with family, it could be a goal that you have, but what are the races that you're in? Do you need to be in all of those? Which are most important, right? And then what are the reapers? I mean, it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. It sticks with me, trust me. Not just in running, but I did think about you out on the Badwater 135 course. Because we have cutoffs, and if you see the race director around mile 50, like, you better speed up.
Yes.
But it applies to every aspect, every race that we're in. Well, Sariya, thank you so much again for making time for us today. And folks, I hope you pick up a copy of Sariya's book. Again, it's Will It Help You Beat the Reaper? The High Achiever's Guide to Focus, Speed, and Top 1% Results. So there will be a link in the show notes. Sariya, any parting thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, I'm excited to see what your audience will do and how your podcast will impact the community. Thank you so much for having me.
You betcha. All right, grab that book, folks. We'll see you again next time.